Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Tango Banter. I am Yelizaveta. And before we launch into our topic today, I wanted to extend an invitation to an upcoming online seminar that I'm doing that's called Essential Layers of a Tango Song That Every Dancer Should Know How to Express. Now, this seminar is a part of my year-long musicality program that I started in January. And I'm opening up certain sessions for people who just want to drop in and take a little bit in of the musicality material that I've prepared for the course. So if you are interested in concepts of musicality and you're specifically interested in the mechanics of how to express musicality, what does it actually mean to be musical, and what is it that we're actually listening for when we strive to be musical? If those questions are interesting to you and you feel compelled to know more, I invite you to check out the link that I'm including in the show notes to see if this is something you might want to join. Now, the seminar is online. You don't need a partner. And if you can't attend live, there will be a recording that you will have access to afterwards. I'm also providing a link to a curated playlist of songs that you'll be able to practice with afterwards. It's going to happen on Tuesday, March 7th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. So check out the link below if you are interested in that, and I hope to see you there. Now, today's topic is, I believe, a very interesting one, and I'm curious if you've even thought about this question of what is the difference between dancing tango and performing tango, and more broadly, what is the difference between dancing and performing? I've wanted to talk about this for a long time, but it took me a while to figure out what exactly I want to say about this. And I thought I would start by mentioning a very cliche saying of dance like nobody's watching. We sort of know this saying very well. We hear it a lot. What does it actually mean? Well, we sort of intuitively understand that it's pointing to some sort of state where you really are allowing yourself to be yourself and that there's nothing hindering you. When I think about dancing like nobody's watching, it's the permission for me to just care about one thing, whatever is on my mind at that moment, the music, my own movement, what I am enjoying. It is the ability or the state where you cut out the rest of the world and you're sort of safe and alone and you're having fun. And somehow it points to this state of pure joy that we all sort of hunger after when we're doing something expressive, right? When we're diving into some sort of a creative process. What we're wanting is this state of just pure creating, pure expression, where we don't care what it looks like, who likes it, who doesn't like it. That's the state that this expression points to for me. And perhaps to you, it's maybe a little bit different, but in general, I think we can agree that it's a desired state, perhaps. Now, when it comes to performing, at least in my very little experience of performance, I've performed very little in my life, but on the surface, at the very start of this idea of performance, it seems it's a completely different state of mind. When I have performed, and perhaps those of you who've done some of that can give me some of your insights about your experience performing. I, of course, welcome that. You can reach out to me on social media at I'm So Tango, or send me a message at connect@imsotango.com. So when I've performed, I'm in the state of being concerned with what I look like and my movements and who's watching, and if I'm fulfilling people's expectations or exceeding them, or am I failing? I am concerned with making mistakes. I'm concerned with looking bad, of not looking graceful. And of course, if you've ever performed in heels, which I have, there's this concern of falling. That the balance, that I might not be able to keep my balance, and I'm going to fall. In general, this sort of state creates a feeling of nervousness. So the adrenaline is pumping, heart pounding, I'm shaking. And, there's quite a bit of an agenda as well when you're like stepping out on the performance floor. You want to do your best, of course. You want to shine. And all of this, there's like these little agendas that we have. So I'll tell you a few of my experiences as we go through this episode. And one of them was my very first performance, actually, was in Portland, Oregon. And I performed with another woman, and we switched lead follow in the middle of the dance. But what added to complexity is that we danced in heels, both of us. I was very new to leading, or I felt very new to leading. I felt like I knew all of 3 moves, and we got together leading up to the performance. We got together several times and practiced and tried to get some moves up our sleeve that would look good in a performance. And we were okay up until the performance. But the moment that we walked out on the floor, and I still remember this, I reach out to take the embrace, and I just start shaking. I mean, I am shaking so bad. I'm sure people saw it. I mean, it was horrendous. I could barely breathe. I was so nervous. The whole performance is just a blur. I was not present. All I could think about is surviving. Everything became so acute, so life or death kind of feeling, And within that, could I remember any of the movements that we learned during that time we practiced? No, none of it. I remembered, I couldn't think straight. It was total survival. And I do remember we danced, the second song we danced about 2/3 of the way through that song. I was leading, and something happened where I sort of went to this other dimension. And I remember it was just a few seconds of that. And in my memory, the way I could describe it is that for a few moments, I was really dancing. And it was just this sort of connection to the music where suddenly it was just the music that existed. There was nothing else. But it was definitely a very brief moment of enjoyment. The rest of it was just, I was so glad it was over. So for me, performing, the idea of performing, of being in front of people, of showing myself, automatically puts up a lot of obstacles. And it's very hard for me to not be concerned with the way I look and how my movements are, it's very difficult for me not to want to impress, not to want to fulfill or exceed expectations. And it's very natural to want to succeed and not fail. So just the presence of those thoughts and the presence of those agendas in the mind, to me, is not a state of dance. Okay? Because to me, dancing, real dancing, is this state where nothing else exists. And all of us as social dancers, we've experienced that. Where it's like, and I think maybe this is what we are after when we're thinking about that perfect tanda, in search of the perfect tanda, as the t-shirt says. What we want is that experience of just, we're just alone, even though we're around other people and there's everybody else. For that particular tanda, it feels like it's just us. And it does not matter. It does not matter what move I do. It doesn't matter if I move at all. As long as I am in communion with the music and my partner, it feels I could do no wrong. And that's actually one of the most common pieces of feedback that I hear dancers say, especially followers, when they try to describe their feeling of euphoria with certain leaders. What they say is, I felt like I could do no wrong, right? And that's an amazing feeling. So for me, the state of pure dancing is that state of really being connected with the music and accepting whatever comes, whatever movement comes from that sort of unconscious impulse and reflex to move, that the music is the conductor of the body, that everything is seen as part of this choreography that is being created spontaneously in the moment. That to me is the magic of dance. Now, I want to also qualify here that sometimes people don't have necessarily a problem with dancing as if nobody's watching. And a lot of those people go to ecstatic dance. If you've never been to ecstatic dance, it's a very special experience where there are certain people who they move. They just move regardless. They move regardless of the music, and they don't care to be with the music. They just sort of have this cathartic expression of movement, which has a place and needs to be recognized as a valid form of expression, but it's not the kind of dance I'm talking about. So I just want to put it out there, because I'm not just talking about letting yourself sort of free fall into some sort of chaotic, uncontrolled movement pattern. I'm really talking about a sort of a communion with the music that you're listening to, and that your body becomes this expressive vessel for that music. That's a very different state. So when I was first getting into tango, I really was not a fan. And I've talked about this before. It took me a long time to actually like it. It felt sort of boring in a certain way. Like I didn't really get it, and I couldn't even feel it that much. I was going to milongas because I had some friends who were going, and I just wanted to have social connection. So I was going and I was dancing here and there. But it wasn't until I saw a particular couple dance at a milonga. And I can't remember whether at that point I had seen any performances, but I remember that it was specifically at a milonga that I saw a couple dance, and it was like the curtain was lifted and I saw something and I couldn't take my eyes away. I was so mesmerized by what they were doing in front of me, and I still remember it quite clearly. Now, as I moved on with dance and I got into tango and I actually ended up getting into some other dance forms, a similar thing happened for me when I was dabbling in blues. I got into blues when I was living in Portland because the guy I liked was into it and he was going there, so I went there. And I remember sitting at a social dance and just sort of wondering what this was all about. And then it's all kind of like, I don't get it. Why are people into this, you know? And then again, in front of me, there happened to be a couple who were dancing, like really dancing to the music they were listening to. And I once again had this same experience of suddenly everyone else disappeared and all I could see was them. And it was mesmerizing. Again, it was heart stopping. It was so inspiring. And that seeing, like I watched them for whatever, a minute and a half or 2 minutes, that got me into blues. And, you know, the performance, or it's not the performance, it's the dance that I saw on the tango dance floor at the Malanga. That's what really got me into tango, is seeing that. It was so powerful. Now, when I first went to Buenos Aires and I started going to the Malangos there, and of course I started going to performances, and I was excited to see performances, but I gotta tell you, I've never experienced the kind of mesmerized state that I experience at the Malanga sometimes when I see people dance on the performance floor. Like I've never seen a live performance that sort of did that for me. But, and this is actually the interesting point that I wanted to make, is that it includes the teachers that I ended up studying. So in Buenos Aires, you know, when I first got there, I was like, oh my God, especially when I got there, the second trip I went, I was going to be there for 6.5 months. So I get there and I'm like, who do I study with? Who are going to be my teachers? There's so many options. I'm asking questions. And every teacher that I chose was basically somebody I saw dancing at the Malanga. So one of them I still remember is I was at a practica, and the practica was cheek to cheek on Wednesday nights, which is one of the highest level practicas. All the cool kids in the professional circle go to cheek on Wednesday. So already I'm looking at the dance floor and all I see is amazing dancers, right? But then this thing happens and I see this woman and the way she moves and how she commands the space around her. And I was like, who is that? And it was none other than Eugenia Parija, who is an incredible dancer. And again, that same thing happened. And I ended up studying with her, and I ended up watching a lot of her performances and studying with her at different festivals. But again, I gotta say, it wasn't the performances that really captured my imagination. It was seeing her really dance at the Malanga. The same thing happened for me with Corina Herrera and Noelia Hurtado. I had heard their names, but I didn't actually know who they were. And I was at a Milonga one night and I'm just watching the crowd. Again, there's so many people. It's so fucking crowded. It's crazy. It's crazy how many people can fit into that space. And this was Monday night at Vija Malcolm, I guess. I think that was the Milonga. So I am scanning the room, and all of a sudden, I see this person, and like I cannot take my eyes off of her. There's something magnetic about just the way she's She's like has gravity around her, and there's nothing you can do but just watch her because there's something so special about what she's doing. And that was Noelia Hurtado. And then that same night, same thing happened with Corina Herrera. And finally, I was like, okay, now I get it. I get why these dancers are so revered. So most of my inspiration has come from watching people dance, and dance on the social dance floor, not as a performance. Now, there are performances that I really love that I actually watch over and over again on YouTube. I have a certain number of them that I just keep coming back to. And when I assess what it is about these performances that pulls me in over and over, I just watched one of my favorites yesterday, actually, by Carlitos Espinosa and Noelia Hurtado, one of their performances that they did to Orquestra Típica Victor track that I really love. I cried. I burst into tears. It was so beautiful. Like, and it's so funny because if I try to explain why I'm crying to someone else who doesn't dance tango, all I can say is like, oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. When I examine exactly why these performances are the ones that pull me in, it's my perception, I should say, because I know this is very subjective. It's my perception is because they're really dancing. They have found a way to dance like nobody's watching while everybody's watching, which to me is the height of mastery of the mind. You know, that's like on par with the best basketball players who are on the free throw line at the most critical moment in the game and they have to make the shot. Like that's the level of mind control and self-possession that you have to be able to really dance while you're performing. And what does that mean? That as you're on the dance floor, the way it looks to me is that there is no predetermined agenda. There's just pure presence. And how do you get that? I mean, that's to me is the $1 million question. How do you develop that? Well, one clue that I've recently gotten was from Horacio Godoy. I keep mentioning our interview because it was such a rich, informative conversation. And it really struck me that he said that he cannot remember choreography. So when he performs, he has to dance that song a few hundred times. So basically, they get together and they just dance that song over and over and over and over again. And you get to a place where you know the song inside out so well that when it comes time to perform, you're basically at the mercy of this song. And because you've danced it so much and you've loved it so much that it produces something novel each time. And I've compared, I'm a total nerd. I've compared Chicho's performances to the same song that are 10 years apart. There's a great Milonga performance that he loves doing this particular song, particular Milonga song, and I compared and contrasted his rendition of it from the 90s versus the 2000s. And it's really interesting to see how the aesthetic language of their movement changes over time, that there's definitely evolution in how they think about the songs they're dancing to, what they choose to show, how much they choose to move. Like earlier Chicho videos are very dynamic when he was in his nuevo phase. There was so much movement across the floor. He's just going, going, going. But over the years, he's really changed his style, and now it's a little bit more conservative and a bit more minimal, but yet effective in a different way. He's sort of learned to consolidate certain things. But it's like each time he dances, to me, it's a new occurrence. It's a completely novel experience. And so Horacio and Chicho Frumboli and Horacio Godoy, as well as Carlitos Espinoza, are three of the dancers that I've spent a long time watching that continuously inspire me in this way, where I can really tell that when they get on the floor, they don't care necessarily about what they do. They don't care about making mistakes. Like sometimes the movements that Horacio Godoy does on the dance floor, they are not very graceful. They don't look refined, but he is so with the song that he doesn't care. He doesn't care what it looks like, because he is in service of that, the most important agenda, which is to express the music. A different side of this exploration for me has been with myself. I have been experimenting with movement and video for a long time. I started making videos of myself dancing, sometimes for the purpose of practicing alignments or practicing certain moves and looking and seeing whether I actually look the way I imagine. And ultimately, what I wanted was to develop the skill of recording myself dancing, actually dancing, the way I would dance when I'd go out to a milonga, or the way I would dance when I would go to a blues dance or a fusion dance. I used to go a lot in Portland, and I would dance a lot by myself. That's where I actually developed a love of dancing by myself. And a lot of times I'd have people come up to me afterwards and compliment me and say, "Man, I just really love watching you dance." And I got that so much that eventually I was like, I want to see it. I want to see what it looks like. It's difficult to dance and watch yourself in the mirror, right? Like that's one of the hardest things to do, because the moment you see yourself in the mirror, you're like examining everything, right? And so it takes you out of that zone. With video, it's a little bit easier, but still I noticed that there's a very distinct difference in the way I move and how I experience the dance if I'm aware that I'm being recorded. So if I put on the camera and start moving, I would always be aware of that, and it would sort of change the way I move. It would make me want to appear a certain way. And it took a long time for me to begin to find a way out of this, or into a different dialogue with this process. And one thing I noticed, and this happens to me actually when I watch other dances that have this quality of just really being in the dance, in the music, is that sometimes when I watch recordings of myself dance, when it's obvious that I'm really in it and my body's really moving with the music, that as I watch myself, my body will start moving unconsciously. Like I can't stop it. It's like I will tense up certain ways, and like my muscles will start contracting. And to me, it's really interesting. It's this power that when you see this sort of pure dance state, it has a physical, chemical impact on me, at least. And I'm curious what kinds of experiences you've had with this, and how you think about these concepts. So, thinking about the difference between the performance and dance, it seems that performing automatically puts you in a state of being or having to measure up. You are intending to perform at your highest level, to appear perfect in certain ways that you value, to really nail something, to really get that move, to really get that sequence, to really get that line. But I've noticed that when there's just sort of pure dance happening, connected to the music, it kind of doesn't matter what movement occurs. It always looks mesmerizing. And this is something I've observed just from my own self-study of looking at a lot of dance. Since I'm just kind of a nerd about it, I've been saving videos on Facebook for years. I have hundreds and hundreds of videos that just really had this visceral impact on me. And a lot of them are videos of like candid videos of somebody dancing at a bar, or someone teaching their kid to dance, or there's a lot of like kids who are just sort of learning movements, and they're kind of get into that dance space. Sometimes it's older people who are not dancers, but they sort of have this natural rhythm, and they're kind of moving with it in such a way that's like, oh my God, that yeah, that's it. That's the real thing. Sometimes, it definitely, there's a lot of modern dance that has this interesting quality where it's like, you might watch a ballet performance that has a lot of technique and a lot of, training that's involved, and you might appreciate it for just its sheer acrobaticism or physicality. But then on this other side, you might watch a modern dancer who just lifts their arm and moves their head to the side, and you're like, whoa, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it's so simple. So mastery of that kind is really special, and it seems like it's hard to pin down exactly what it is, but I definitely see the difference for myself, even how I experience my dance. So this is why actually I don't perform very much. In my mind, when I perform, if I perform, I want to show me dancing. I want to just dance. I want to do what I see or I perceive Chicho doing or Horacio. Like, that's my goal. But I don't think I can do that. I haven't been able to do that in the past, in the few times that I've done it. And therefore, I've had this feeling of like, I just I don't want to do this for the purpose of just doing it or showing off or proving something to someone. I want to do it for the purpose of just showing what it means to dance, And this is something that's a personal critique of mine as well, that we see a lot of performances that really are about performance. And you can tell that the dancers are very invested in looking a certain way, in executing certain moves. Sometimes it's at the expense of musicality. Sometimes it is with the music, but it is sort of mechanical. And there's a lot of that around. It's actually quite rare for me to watch a performance that has that quality that I'm sort of drawn to, you know. And a lot of times what happens is that people watch that, and in their minds they're interpreting that as, oh, that's really dancing. That's what tango is supposed to be like. That's what dancing is supposed to be. And then they might take that and try to apply it on the social dance floor, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and there's frustration about that. And there is resistance to this agenda on the social dance floor in every way. We talk about that. I've talked about that already, that anytime that you're in a state of wanting to achieve some sort of move, it takes away from that stillness and that presence. So in my mind, it's like the stillness and the presence is what we want to see. And you see that on the social dance floor quite a bit. And that's why I really enjoy a lot of times just sitting and watching people dance. And it's incredible what you see. People who are not necessarily the most graceful or the most technically advanced, but when you really see them get into the zone and really be with the music, it's mesmerizing, as I said. So I think what we really want to see, or what my wish is, that performances would sort of be about that, of showing what it's like to be present, of what it's like just to be with the music, to not hold so much agenda. And it's very hard to learn. So of course, there's not a lot of performers can do that, or they do that to different degrees. And of course, all of them or most of them will believe that they're doing that. And many people maybe think that they're doing that. It's ultimately very subjective. So I know I'm stepping on very gray zone here. I'm not trying to pronounce a judgment that certain people are musical and certain people are not. But I am pointing to a difference in the state of, what it's like when you perform versus when you dance. But as I said, I haven't performed for this reason, but I recently signed up for the Jack and Jill competition, which is part of the the Southern California Championship that's coming up in March. And I did that. I signed up specifically for exploring this question, that as I go to compete, which I'm sure is going to make me super nervous, and I'm competing as a leader, which is even more interesting. I'm really curious what's going to happen, because I'm sure I'm going to feel all of that pressure. I'm going to feel nervous. I'm going to feel like I don't measure up, that all these people are better than me. I have no idea what I'm doing. I only know 5 moves. Let's make sure I do this move that's really fun. I'm sure I'm going to have all of that. And my question to myself will be, can I set all of that aside and just dance? And what does that mean? And what's going to happen with it? What's going to happen out of that? So, I will keep you posted on how it goes. It's, I guess, in a couple of weeks at the time of this episode airing. But for you, I would love for you to consider this in your dance and ask yourself, when you go dance next time at the Milonga, see if you can recognize in your own mind the difference between really dancing and being with the music versus wanting to appear a certain way, or wanting to show off, or get something done that you've been working on. Again, neither one is bad, because ultimately these are skills, right? Performance is a skill, okay? It's not the same as a dance skill. To me, they're 2 different skill sets. And I remember somebody telling me that you could be a great performer, a great social dancer, or a great teacher. You could be two of them, but you can never be three. And so for me, I've kind of had that in my mind. That to me, I definitely excel at dancing. That's really where my interest lies of how can I dance regardless? How can I find a place of dance regardless of the embrace, regardless whether I like the music, regardless whether the floor is working, regardless whether somebody's judging me? What do I do? How do I still dance? That's my question for myself. And I would invite you to do some self-reflection for you, because I think it's important for us as dancers to have the awareness of our own states of mind, because guess what? It totally affects people around you and your partners. So when you have an agenda and you are really in that performance state, you're dancing with somebody who's like in this completely other state, there will be friction. So yeah, consider that. And would love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Of course, you are always invited to join my private Facebook group, where we will be exploring these ideas in some upcoming live chats that I'll be doing. So make sure you join the group if you haven't. The link is in the show notes. That's all I have for this banter today, and I look forward to bantering with you next week. Until then, have some great dancing, and we'll chat soon. Ciao.